I'm more nervous.
Good evening, Keepers of the Cash. Gary B, the Casual Comic Guy here, and I am joined with a couple hosts tonight. We have Digger Jim. How you doing tonight, Jim?
Good, very good. Thank you.
We have Adrian here, Mr. Pandawesome himself. How you doing tonight, kind sir?
What's going on, guys? Doing
Not
good.
too much.
Doing
And
good.
of course, the woman of the hour. We have Mars back, fresh from her appearance not that long ago on the 1011.
I know, man. I was just here like what, a week ago, 2 weeks ago? It's crazy.
Yeah. You know, what a great episode it was. We had so much fun and a lot of cool things.
It was a lot of fun.
But her link is in the description below, as is Panda's and Jim. So sub up all these nice people. And we will say hi to the chat real quick. And then, Mars, we'll have you, after I say hi to the chat, give a quick explanation of you and your channel for those watching on the rewind, as is something I like to do. But we have, of course, Adrian was popping in before he got in. Unruly Simeon, good evening, sir. And we got Mars saying hi to the audience. Victoria Schultz, oh, good evening.
That's my mom. My mom's watching this.
Hi, Mom.
And we have Niall M. Thanks for coming by. I like seeing new people in the chat. Nick's Kix and Comix. How you doing tonight, sir? Chop and Drop, good evening. Jerry, good evening. And let's see. We also have One Shot Comics. Good evening. Ignacio, how you doing tonight, sir? And of course, Digger Jim saying hello to Chop. And guys, a great one. I just want to say I am so glad to get to this episode this week. My week has been pure hell at work. I have over 40 hours in 3 days. It's been like 5 in the morning to 8 o'clock at night. I'm exhausted. Everyone's like, you're going home and going to sleep tonight, right? I'm like, hell no, I'm getting on YouTube and I'm having fun.
There it is.
But anyway, Mars, the table is yours. Introduce yourself yet again.
So I'm Mars. I am the self-proclaimed That Comic Girl of the internet. I've been a part of comics for about 12 years now. I've done everything in terms of journalism and reviewing comics on blogs and other websites. But then I recently stepped into my own channel about 3 years ago with That Comic Girl, where I do reviews, recommendations. I do character deep dive. Sometimes it's just screaming about the comics that I love and that I wish people were reading. But more importantly, I am part of a fantastic duo known as Casually Comics here on YouTube, over at the Comic Books Will Break Your Heart channel. And that is a weekly Sunday show that I do every week with my comic book BFF, Jennifer. We basically read a lot of books every single week. We break them down. We get a lot of violent. But most importantly, we are always honest about the books that we love. And of course, the books that we don't love.
Yeah, I want to touch on that for a minute because, like, I think I told you this backstage. I try to prep a little bit before each show, and I went back and looked at that last episode you guys did.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what I like about more than anything when I do watch you and Jen is that honesty part. It's honest, but it's also not just going, oh, this book is trash. No, you break it down and kind of say, look, this book is really not good for these reasons. It's easy for somebody to say this book is trash, but then you also give decent reasons to why you specifically don't like it. Not necessarily that I might not like it, but that, this is not my taste. But you did talk about and I just want to touch very little about it, the Hispanic covers that were out. And I was like, I've been seeing this rolling through chats and I've been trying to figure out what that is. I mean, like,
we didn't have those in my LCS. So the first time I saw it was on their show. I was like, really? They made that?
I didn't see it either. So
they actually just rolled it back this week. So with all the backlash that was happening from Sunday, well, not from Sunday, but from the week, they kind of like announced that they were going to be releasing a re-edited cover. So essentially they're going to be re-releasing the original Kyle Rayner Titans I think it's like Titans Bloodsport or Bloodshot that's coming out, and it's for the Hispanic Heritage Month. And they're reverting it back to the original cover. The only difference is now in the Mexican flag, they put the eagle back, which originally wasn't there because the eagle was jumping off of the flag with the Green Lantern energy. So I think it's cool that they listened, but also I'm still not forgiving them for doing it in the first place.
Yeah, it was. I don't know who.
It was weird.
Yeah, I feel like somebody needs to have a little editing, before they go out and post these type of things. Somebody to bounce off. Is this a good idea? Because that, to me, when I watched it and then you guys showed it, I was like, ooh, that's bad.
It was rough.
That's bad.
It was rough.
But I thoroughly enjoyed the show.
In my opinion, Mars, that kind of stuff, there's a way to do it right and a way to do it wrong. The way to do it wrong is
what they did.
To be our reaction, just to be immediately reactionary, just trying to do it to cash in on it, which is how that stuff always feels when it's completely tone deaf. I was like, well, you guys didn't do your work. You didn't look into anything. You just put out something that you thought would grab attention, and it got attention, but for the wrong reasons.
Absolutely. And I feel like I'm going to get a lot of backlash saying it, but I feel like we had a similar situation like 8 years ago with the during the New 52, DC Comics was doing a Joker variant month where he was appearing on a bunch of covers, Wonder Woman, Batman, Superman. He showed up on a Batgirl cover, and the artwork was done by Raphael Albuquerque.
I remember that cover.
The Killing Joke Joker with Burnside Batgirl, and he basically had her like hostage and had this smile painted on her face while she grinned. And I knew immediately when I saw that cover, I was like, this is not right. This is not okay. I was definitely one of those people that were very outspoken about it and wrote several articles about it. And they eventually removed the cover entirely. And rather than replace it with something else, they just said, okay, maybe Joker appearing on a Batgirl cover isn't the most appropriate thing, which I think was in good taste, but it's one of those cases of, did you not think about it before you released it, before you commissioned it? And it just kind of rubs me the wrong way sometimes.
That's what I mean. Somebody needed to, I don't know. There needed to be an editor there going, dude, what were you thinking? Sure. We can't do this. I mean, this is.
But Jim, you got to understand, like, how many people like handle this one piece of artwork. It's not just like the artist goes directly to print. It's that's so many editors that go through it, and you're just like, how did nobody catch this? Like, yeah. I get that, dude. I'm totally with that, man, because it's so weird how everybody's just like, yeah, let's just put it all out there. Whatever happens, or, people are just thinking about, some of the consequences that could happen with some of the things. And, even 8 years ago, like, we're not as conscious about what we're doing now. You know what I mean? Like, the culture has changed from even just 8 years ago. So it's, I'm just, it's just sad to see covers like that. The Hispanic cover is just, it's not
they boil down to a stereotype, unfortunately.
Right. Let me go get my rice hat real quick. Let me go ahead and do that for you guys.
So, but touching on this kind of aspect of talking about these things, you're big into comic journalism. So talk for a minute about why you think it's so important in the industry and the importance of it just being out there. Like we were talking in the green room about shows like Casual Comic Chat that you do with Jen, and we'll get into when you guys started that and how you guys met. But speak just for a moment about why you think comic journalism needs a voice and why it's important to the industry.
Absolutely. So, like, it's, oh my God, I feel like I'm being interviewed now.
Well, this is the interview show. You were on the easy show last time.
This ain't the 10-1-1.
It's a hot seat, baby.
We deep diving.
Comic journalism is important because it's a form of media like anything else, like video games, like movies, like TV shows, like books. And these are all things that are being reviewed and talked about. And the importance of comics journalism, I mean, not just comics journalism, but any journalism, is the fact that you're putting out what you like and what you don't like out there. You're informing people and getting them excited. And I feel like for comic books, which are a very niche medium, they've certainly gotten bigger, especially with the pandemic. I feel like within the past like 3 years alone, we've seen comics kind of explode both in the aftermarket and in just like current sales, current releases, and things like that.
Right.
And I'm definitely that type of person where like I'll be scrolling on Twitter and I'll see somebody talking about a book that they really liked or linking an article or even just releasing a press release for a book. And I'm like, that book seems really interesting. And I put it on a list and I tuck it away for later. And I feel like it's important because this is such a niche medium. And not only is it such a niche medium, but it can be a very confusing medium, especially if you have somebody, you know, little Timmy decides, I want to read Batman. So little Timmy goes into Barnes and Nobles and goes to the Batman section, but he sees 6 or 7 Batmans with number 1 on them. And he's like, well, which one do I start with? I feel like comics journalism kind of helps bridge that gap between a casual fan and somebody who might get into it like myself for life and forever and spend $1 million on it. It's fine. Mom, just don't listen to that. It's cool. But like, it's important, you know, to get people hyped up and to get people excited for these types of books that we love, because nobody's talking about them. And if nobody's talking about it, then we need to talk about it, you know?
And also think too, that goes with any kind of medium where you have critique going on, whether it's movie reviews, comic reviews, TV show reviews, book reviews, is you got to find the right critic that fits you, right? So you always are going to gravitate this. You want to gravitate to someone that has the same sort of taste. That's the only real way you as a consumer can find what's the best books to spend your money on. Someone that has similar taste in you that you generally align with. Now, every once in a while, though, you do want to make sure that you're not just exposed to that. You want to leave yourself open for new things that are coming out that you may want to give a chance and expand your horizons. Right. But I think it is important to not necessarily just go, this critic sucks, that critic sucks. Just find one that echoes what resonates with you and follow their journalistic view. Just like we do with movies, you know, not everyone agreed with every movie critic, but you find the movie critics you like and that like the type of movies. And I don't know, I think that voice is kind of important because I think you have to be smart in the way you consume your any type of journalism. And especially you have to make sure that it's not agenda-driven journalism sometimes.
Exactly. But I also feel like, so I like that you say agenda journalism. So like you'll never, okay, that's a lie, because I've definitely talked about writers that I don't like and kind of holding them accountable. But there's a difference between holding them accountable and maybe bashing somebody for not liking their work. Like, for example, I'm not a fan of Scott Snyder, but you'll never hear me talk about, you know, I don't like Scott Snyder. I don't like the books that he likes because I just don't like them. I always give reasons. You know, I've always talked about on the show, I don't like Scott Snyder's writing because it's a little wordy for me and my goldfish brain can't comprehend it. So, like, for example, when a Scott Snyder book comes along, like Dark Spaces Wildfire, which recently released from IDW, and I'm sitting here in my seat being like, I read this book. It's probably my favorite book from the week. I can't wait for the next one. You know that it's good because it shows me saying what I like and what I don't like kind of develops my taste. And you as a viewer, as a reader, as a consumer, know my taste. Like if I say I don't like crime books, but then I go and I say, hey, I really like this book that happened to be a crime book. You know, obviously my taste can change and evolve, and maybe that's a book that you need to be checking out, whether you like crime books or you don't like crime books.
Yeah, and I think more of my point to that too is just the culture that and you see this a lot more prevalent in visual journalism of like TV and movies. Like a show will be coming out or a movie will come out, and you'll see a bunch of critics, because it's not aimed at them, they will go and review bomb these movies and these shows. So I'm talking about that kind of negativity.
Yeah.
Like someone that's just blindly review bombing stuff because it doesn't fit, you know, their personal agenda.
So we're calling out everybody who review bomb She-Hulk, right? That's what we're talking about?
Well, not Well,
We can talk about anything.
Just anything. There was a bunch of movies that got review bombed.
Yeah.
Thor. The last Thor movie got hammered. Excuse the pun, but they got hammered by some people. You know.
There was a bunch of foreign cinema that's been review bombed. That was good cinema, but it didn't fit what these people wanted, so they get a bunch of people together and they just go and review bomb the sites.
I think you just have to filter. Like you said, Gary, I think you just have to filter what you want to see, but to a degree where you're allowing a little bit of an opening just to expand to somebody that you might respect their opinion to a point where, okay, I know this person doesn't agree with me on everything, but I want to hear what he has to say about this book or she has to say about this book so that I might pick it up. Now, circling back to Scott Snyder, did you not like Nocterra?
I did, but I liked the concept of Nocterra, but there was something about it that felt off for me. It's definitely one of those books.
Love that book.
It's one of those books where I read the first issue and like I kind of dug where it was going, but it, like I said, it wasn't enough for me to keep reading, and it's just one I haven't picked up in trade yet. But I'll read it in trade and I'll let you know what I think.
Yeah, I just, you know, I like, for me, gosh, how can I say this? I like the art of comics more than anything. From the time I was a kid, it's about the art for me. For my brother, it was always the story. I have finally grown to where I expect more from both. And I love Tony Daniels' art, and the story was really good, I thought. But you know, again, everybody has their opinion, and I just like to hear that you're not just, you know, I just can't stand it when I hear somebody go, oh, that book was trash. Okay, well, why? Why was it trash? You know, I have to have a reason.
And I feel like one of the reasons why I do it is I'm partially because I do have a background in literature. So English and books, they were my heavy focus growing up. I mean, from the time that I was like 2, I was carrying around multiple books at a time. And I just I was definitely that person in high school and middle school who had like 6 books at all time in my book bag. And I just gradually moved to comics. But I think part of the reason why I break down comics the way that I do is also too because I want to be a part of this industry one day. So I need to know how it works, how it runs, how it functions, what makes a good book, what makes a bad book. So that way, when it comes time for me to go and write my own books, you know, I know what works. I know what doesn't work. And then I also have in the back of my head that, okay, not everybody's going to like this, but there is going to be an audience. And that's how this media works. That's why it's art. Art is subjective. Right. And, you know, yes, there are times where we can be objective about that art because sometimes it just happens, you know, if a piece is not working. But for the most part, it's subjective and everybody's going to like what they like.
So you said that you want to get into the business in that way. Is there anything like any kind of like mock-up stories that you've done? Maybe like short haikus that you could expand into a novel? You know what I mean? Like,
so I actually have 5 scripts that are in the works that are indie comics.
Nice.
Okay.
Are they all sequels to Nocterra?
One of them is close to Nocterra in terms of its post-apocalyptic. So yes, I'll give it that.
So you're doing Kickstarter with them or what?
I'm not doing Kickstarter. I have a couple artists that I am close with and that I'm working with once I'm able to get a story finished. And that's the problem is I'm terrible with coming up with an ending. I have a really great middle, really great beginning, really great concept. I'm also a perfectionist and I need to stop doing that and realizing that not everything that I write or create is going to be perfect. But I started out with like, you know, getting into comics and always having a writer brain and being like, I want to write DC comics and I want to write like Justice League comics. And I actually did write an entire 1-issue script of a Justice League story. And it's the only thing I've ever finished, which I think is ironic because it's the only thing I could never like pitch because the big 2 don't accept pitches, which is completely understandable. But then something clicked. And I think it was with, I talked about this with David F. Walker on our show a couple weeks ago, reading 4 Kids Walk Into a Bank by Matthew Rosenberg and Tyler Boss and published by Black Mass Comics. One of the if not the best indie comic book of all time, probably the best comic book of all time. Matthew Rosenberg and Tyler Boss have just a way of creating stories that made me realize I don't want to write superhero comics anymore. I want to write indie comics and be weird and tell these weird stories. Like, I have a very weird sense of humor. And I kind of just want to write black comedies and like the darkest shit imaginable while still laughing about it. And you can't do that with I mean, you can do it with superheroes, but you can't do that with Marvel and DC properties. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to write my own stuff. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. It's what makes me happy.
Right. You don't want to be stuck within the frames and formulas of a big two.
Exactly, because what a lot of people don't understand, and I've learned this by talking to people like Paul Levitz, who is the former editor-in-chief of DC Comics, is the person that really pushed me in to like wanting to write comics. I met him at Baltimore Comic-Con. The first like 3 years I started going, and he sat down with me for 2 hours and just talked to me about the importance of writing comics, the books that I needed to be reading to learn the craft, movies I needed to watch to help learn the craft, the people in the industry themselves I needed to talk to, just to, not necessarily to get my foot in the door, but who to learn so I could perfect my craft so that way when it came time and ready, I knew how to do it.
Wow. That's awesome.
He's fantastic and amazing, and I'm thankful for him. But like, comics are just, they're great and they're fantastic. And I was going with a thought and I've completely lost it now. The goldfish brain is in full effect.
Now, you said something earlier that I connected with, and it's something that people have always looked at me weird for. I will literally be reading 5 or 6 different novels at the same time. They go, well, how do you just focus? Why can't you, like, how do you read more than one at a time? I'm like, well,
I can't do
they're all
it.
different. I know what's going on in each of them.
I can't. My wife does the same thing, Gary. She'll have 3 books over there on the nightstand. I'm like, I don't see how you do that. I need one at a time, baby. I'm not that deep of a reader. I have to stay focused on the one.
I'm the same way, man. I can't. I have to focus on one fork. I can't have 3 in one hand. It just can't, man.
Well, and Jim said reading, but Jim meant crayons. Jim's a colorer. If the big crayons broke, Jim's out.
I'm just saying. My wife does the same thing, and we're not talking about similar books. They will be, all 3 of them be totally different type of stories. Same. And she can, like, I know exactly where I'm at with here. You're not going to believe what's happening to this guy. I'm like, oh, and this woman, she dies at the. I'm like, what? How do you keep it all in that head? But I married up, so you know. Move forward. Back to Mars. Let's talk about how you met Jen, because I haven't heard this story, and I really want to hear it.
Oh my God.
I need the origin story there.
Thanks, Gary. I'm going to cry twice on your show in a row. Thank you.
That's all right.
I always get emotional when I talk about Jen. Listen, so Jen knows this. I've told this story a couple times, and Jen is always like, when I tell the story. So I've been on Instagram for like 12 years. It's a ridiculous amount of time, but I didn't really start posting like comics until maybe like 8 years ago. I was just casually posting comics, my collection, my figures and stuff like that. And one day I stumbled upon Jen's profile and I was like, holy shit, another girl who reads comics and like collects comics the way that I do. And she's cool and she's cute. And I'm like, all right, I want to be friends with this girl. So we followed each other and like we would like each other's stuff. We would occasionally like message each other like, oh, that's so cool. Like, I'm so jealous of your collection. And at the time I was doing my YouTube thing. She had started hers. She was also doing a weekly show with Dan over on Comic Chop News. And she messaged me and she's like, hey, I kind of want to bring you on the show to talk comics because I just think you're cool and I think you're awesome. And I just want to hear you talk about comics with me. And I'm like, oh, look, speak of the devil. She hears me talking about her and she shows up. So Jen invites me to do Casually Comics and I'll never forget it because I was so fucking excited. I remember going around my house telling my mom, I get to hang out with the cool girl, Jen. She had no idea what I was talking about. Me and Jen did a show. We clicked. We started talking more about comics. I started reading Batwoman. She started reading Batwoman. And she's like, let's do a show. Let's talk about Batwoman. I was like, nice. Cool, let's do it. So we did a show where we talked about Batwoman. And like I said, it was just kind of like it clicked. And then we started being like, let's do a show. and talk about the comics we're reading. And then it started just spiraling and evolving and becoming the coolest shit ever. And it was like, I felt like I had found the best friend that I always wanted, like who not only was a girl. I mean, I'm not saying that her being a girl is important, but it's pretty, listen, when you're a girl in comics, it's a whole nother fucking field. Okay.
Sure.
But it was a woman who loved comics the way that I loved comics. And we could text each other screaming, I read this book. Have you read this book before? It's completely changed my life. Or I've read this book. It completely ruined my life. And like,
oh, we're going to get to that.
I just loved having her around. And within the past year, like we're coming up on the 2-year anniversary of Casually Comics, which to me is just absolutely insane because I literally get to spend every week talking about what I love with one of the people that I love most in the world. And it's crazy because we've never met. I'm in Delaware on the East Coast. She's in Portland on the West Coast. We've never met before. But the day that actually happens, listen, this world's going to explode, okay? The world's going to absolutely explode the day that me and Jen come together.
Y'all need to meet in the middle like C2E2 or something. Come on. That should be you fly this way, you fly that way. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm trying to convince her to come out to Baltimore, but we'll see.
Oh, man. Yeah, come out to Baltimore, definitely.
Sticking with you and Jen, I had a 2-part question here because, of course, we all know Jen's name is Comics Will Break Your Heart, right?
I like that.
So I think I already know the question. What comic book story broke your heart and what comic book story restored it?
Ooh, dun dun dun.
So a deep 2-parter.
The comic book that broke my heart.
Because you either cried or you threw the book in a rage or you did both. And then you found one that restored you.
I'm going to answer that in like 2 different ways. I'm going to answer it in 2 different ways. So with the comic books will break my heart. So I'm going to talk about the comic that made me rage and broke my heart and the comic book that just genuinely made me break down and absolutely lose it. So let's talk about the former first, the one that made me rage, because that's the fun one, right? That's why you're all here. Damn, I hate. All right, Brian fucking Azzarello wrote a book in 2020 called Birds of Prey, and it was an oversized Black Label one-shot. He was supposed to get a whole fucking Birds of Prey series, but then it got canned, and they condensed it into a one-shot. And he fucking killed a character that I really, really love from the Black Canary series. He wrote a bunch of weird racist shit. He sexualized the fuck out of Black Canary and made her kind of sleep around as a floozy. And like, don't get me wrong, she can get with any man that she wants, but when she avoids her friends who are dying to go and sleep with somebody, I'm over it. I have a whole video on my channel talking about that book. So if you want to know more about that, you can go.
I'm going to go find it now for sure. 100%.
Cringy. It's kind of cringy as fuck, but listen, I was passionate and I need to get it off my chest. It's fine.
Oh yeah.
The book that like broke my heart. I mean, I could easily say something like Saga, or I could say something like Bolero. Actually, no, we'll come back to that. Let's come back to that one. So the book that broke my heart was Sweet Tooth. So Sweet Tooth by Jeff Lemire. I recently read it. It's a big fucking chunky boy. It's like 60 fucking issues. And I had the compendium and I had this for years. And I was like, fuck it. I'm going to finally read this thing. I had put it on my like books that I'm going to read in 2022. And I finally read it and I cried at the end of it because it took me about 2 weeks to read the book because it's 60 issues. And it was the only book that I was reading aside from my weekly stuff that I was reading with Casually Comics. And I felt like my long journey with these characters came to an end. And I'm not going to spoil the ending because I had no idea how it ended. And I feel like despite the book being around for 20 years at this point, I had no idea how it ended. But it felt like I said, my journey with these characters ended. And I remember just being a gross, sobbing, disgusting mess. And my boyfriend was in the room at the time and he was playing video games and I was reading my book and he just looked at me because he's like, why are you crying like a family member died? And I'm like, because it's over and I'm never going to get to see them again. And I was just crying hysterical. So that's the book that probably broke my heart. Now you mentioned what was it? The book that made me
That
the
brought
book
you
that
back.
restored your faith in
Right.
comics and mended your heart.
Okay, so the book that restored my faith in comics was definitely Bolero, which came out this year from Wyatt Kennedy and Luana Vecchio. So I've talked about this book a bunch on my weekly show with Jen. Bolero is, to me, the most important book that has come out in the past 10 years. It's a new series that released this year from Image Comics. It's 5 issues long. It is now in trade. Please go buy the trade. No, I do not get royalties of it. I just think you should just read this book.
I picked it up and set it back down on the shelf. Now I got to go get it.
So freaking good. So Bolero follows the story of a girl named Devin who is heartbroken, and she breaks up with her girlfriend, and she basically is met by this magical, mystical cat who is like, I'm giving you the power to leap through multiverses, and you can do it like 67 times to find the perfect universe that works for you, but you can't go backwards. And if you skip one because you think maybe there's something better out, you can't go back to it. And it's her basically leaping through all of these scenarios. Sometimes she's in medieval days, sometimes she's in Royal Regency days, other times she's in space, sometimes she's gender bent as a male. Sometimes she's with a dude, sometimes she's with a lady, sometimes she's with multiple people. It is just a really interesting exploration of sexuality and identity. And the ending of that book came out at a very rough time in my life. I was not going through a really great bout of mental health. And it was a day that I didn't even want to do the show. And I read this book and I was like, all right, I have to do the show because I got to talk about it, because I quite literally feel like the book saved my life, because there's a line at the end of the book that, Devin ends up meeting herself in like this weird corporeal, like angelic version of herself.
Okay.
And she makes a comment of, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know, I've been feeling all this way. I don't know who I am anymore. This book also touches on issues with Devin's mother, which, I've had my own issues with my own mother. Luckily, we've worked past those, but, it felt like the book was speaking to me. And
Sure.
One of the lines from this ethereal being is, it doesn't matter where you're going to be. Just know that you're going to be okay. And that was it. That was the line for me I was like,
let me get my pen.
It doesn't matter what I do. It doesn't. I have it saved on my computer somewhere, because I reached out to Luana Vecchio and I was like, hey, I need this panel. I need this panel in my house. I need it somewhere where when I'm having really bad days and I don't know if I can keep doing it, I need to be able to look at it myself. And she was like, I give you my permission. Here's a full res file, because she's in another country. She's like, get it printed, get it framed, do what you have to do. And I'm like, thank you. Like,
that's amazing.
It changed my life. It's a book that changed my life. It really is. And I know it's weird. I know, I talk about, jumping through space and time and queer identity and things like that. It is a really weird book that is somehow very, very grounded and very, very relatable. And I'm pitching for everybody to read it, because it is already my book of 2022 and probably my book of the decade.
Ooh.
Okay, so if I'm gonna go by I think it's where I'm going. I'm going to comic shop tomorrow, because I haven't been all week, and I'm gonna check, see if there's a trade there of it.
Now let's touch on something else you mentioned in there: mental health in comics.
Yes.
Because I know comics are an escape from me from just stress in general of life. I can go to a book, lose myself in it, have fun with these characters, and come out the other side in a better place than I was when I sat down with the book. And I think that's a part of this hobby that doesn't get talked about enough is, these books can change your day even if it's just a moment that you need. These books can do that for you.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's ironic, because like a lot of my favorite characters and a lot of my favorite books are characters that either have mental health problems,
sure,
or books that involve and are around mental health. So I have a running theme here that those are my favorite types of books. Is if I can relate it to it on somebody who does not have the greatest mental health, your book is great in my eyes. That being said, I have read some books that portray mental health as very bad. I can't think of any at the moment, but you know, when I get a good one that portrays it very well, especially when you have like those creators, I really love when creators put aftermatter in their books and maybe they talk about the importance of mental health, or they talk about, you know, what was important to them. Because like, for example, in Bolero, Wyatt Kennedy talks about how right before he wrote the beginning of Bolero, he was on the verge of a mental breakdown.
Right.
And he had some sort of meeting with somebody that, you know, and they said a very similar thing to him in a bathroom of all places. And it changed his whole outlook and, you know, kind of inspired, I'm pretty sure inspired that final line that he put in his own book. So I really love books that focus on that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And well, there was something I wanted to get to too. You were talking about, so we're talking about the books. Sorry, I'm trying to make Jen a moderator as well here. But the one thing that when I was looking through your channel, I didn't find what got you into comics.
Right.
So you have such a deep love for them and a respect for them, and you're obviously just a little bit passionate about them, just a little.
Can you tell? Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. What got you into comics to start with, though?
So I joke, I have multiple origin stories. I really do. So, you know, growing up as a kid, I was always into like Batman, X-Men. I think we talked about on the 1011. I grew up watching X-Men the animated series. I ran home every day from the bus to watch Batman the animated series and Superman the animated series, you know, and continued to grow up on those movies. You know, as a teenager, I got really into like Tim Burton Batman, and of course The Dark Knight came out around that time. So I was always just kind of like a nerd into those characters and that culture. But in terms of reading comics, so I say I have multiple origin stories because it's two dividing points that got me into it. So when I was in high school, I had an English teacher who kind of knew that I was really into like comic book characters and knew my love for Tim Burton's Batman and things like that. And he's like, have you ever actually read a comic? And he wasn't being condescending about it. He was genuinely asking. He's like, with your passion, he's like, you know, I want to know what your favorite comic is. And I'm like, I've never read a comic. So my 11th grade English teacher, I am like 15 or 16 at this time, hands me from his personal library that was in the classroom the fucking Watchmen as the first ever comic book for me to read.
Wow.
That is a heavy fucking book.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
As a fucking teenager,
Political,
okay?
everything too.
I believe he could have gone with anything else lighter.
Well, here's the thing. It worked. It worked because growing up, I always thought that comics were Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, the X-Men.
Right.
I didn't even know that the Watchmen existed.
Right.
I read the Watchmen, and to say that it changed my life was an understatement because it did. Not only in my politics and the way that I view the world, but just because it was another form of storytelling that was unlocked to me. And like I said, I was that kid that carried 5 or 6 books in my bag at one time. So we talked about it. He then gave me the movie because apparently the movie had came out right around that time. And I loved both. I'm not one person that loves both the Watchmen movie and Watchmen comic. And I don't even like fucking Zack Snyder, okay? But I will fucking protect the Watchmen with my whole chest.
I didn't say anything. I was like,
I wasn't for Halloween. Oh my God, my mother unlocked a memory. So that year I actually dressed up as Rorschach for Halloween. I bought a trench coat from Goodwill and a fucking black hat from Goodwill. I took a white pillowcase that I cut holes in so I could breathe and painted my mask. And I was so upset because nobody knew who I was except for one guy who, ironically enough, was the last house I went to on Halloween. Thank you for unlocking that memory, Mother.
Yeah, we need pictures.
Pictures.
I think I have pictures somewhere. I'll have to find them. And if I do, I'll share them.
We'll be checking IG for those.
We want some IG posts, please.
So that's kind of like the start. But I didn't really touch a comic after that. You know, I picked up, on my own accord, I bought Batman Hush and Marvel Civil War, which are very bad comics for a young baby comic reader to pick up because both comics have way too many characters that I did not know about and I didn't understand. So it kind of put me off of comics for a little bit. I went to college 2 years later. I was living in Philadelphia alone, away from home. One of my roommates had bought me a issue of Catwoman for Christmas that she got from a shop in Philly. And I was like, I kind of want to go to this shop in Philly. And there I met my really good friend Keo, who worked at the shop. And he kind of nurtured my love for comics because he used to ask me, you know, what kind of characters was I into growing up. And then we would walk around the shop and he would literally make me a pile of books for me to read. And knowing that I was a dumb, broke kid, he would tell me to sit in a corner because Atomic City Comics on South Street in Philadelphia has a really great reading spot where you can go in with food or coffee, buy your books and read them. And he would literally sit me in a corner and not expect me to buy anything, knowing how broke I was as a college kid in Philly. He would just let me read for hours and hours.
Wow, how great's that?
And
That's
when
amazing.
it came time for my last day in Philly and our last time we hung out together, he sent me home with a stack of books like this.
Aww.
And from there, I was hooked. From there, I was like, all right, I got to find my own local LCS. I got to start my own pool list. And I never looked back. I really never looked back. So comics, I feel like even though I've only been doing it 12 years, it's always been a part of me. And it always will be a part of me. Every time I think, I'm like, I don't know if I want to collect comics anymore. I have a whole filing cabinet with books that just sit there and collect dust. Like, why do I do this? Every time I think about that, I'm like, no, I'm an idiot. I love comics and I'm stuck here until I die.
Because you know what can happen is you could have like 2 years again where you're stuck in your house and you can go back and revisit those books that you bought like 10 years ago and you're like, oh, I love this story and this is why I love it, because I wanted to read it again. I mean,
in the last couple of years, I've been rereading a lot of Bronze Age series. Like I reread the whole Spider Woman run. I reread the whole ROM run. Just having the best time ever. Because not only that, but, and you're probably still a little too young for this, Mars, but when you read something that you read in the 70s as a kid and you reread it as an adult,
Shut up.
You get to experience the story.
It's in the 70s, like
on two different
everybody's too young for that.
But you get to experience it on two different levels because you still have the kid mentality because it takes you back nostalgia-wise. Right. Adrian's going to pick on me now.
Love you, Gary.
I will say, like, that is the one thing I envy, because it's like I talk with everybody that I've met through YouTube, or I talk with everybody that I've met through Instagram, and they talk about, you know, going into the shops with their parents and paying, you know, the $1 for a comic book and taking it home and it being their treasure, and then talking about how, you know, these people have literally gone out their way and paid maybe more money than they should have for that particular book purely because it's nostalgic to them. And that's like the one thing I envy, being, I guess, part of that younger crowd, is I don't have that nostalgia. I remember my dad taking us, not yet, but I remember my dad taking us to flea markets and him buying my brother comics out of like 10-cent bins. But I didn't really have that experience. The closest thing I can think of is I remember my brother used to get those Marvel Legends that came with like the reprints, most of them being from the Ultimate series. I remember those and flipping through them and thinking that they were cool, but I never actually sat down to read one until high school and college.
Well, we're a little more seasoned than you are, Mars. So our nostalgia is there now, you know, and you're growing your nostalgia.
I'm growing.
You know?
I'm getting there.
You're getting there. So,
but you live in a day and age where you can grow it smarter than what Jim and I and probably Adrian did, because now we had to rebuy everything we liked.
Yeah. You tell him, man. I know exactly. Yeah, that nostalgia hits so hard because it's stuff that you remember from when you had it as a kid, and so it's like, oh, I had it as a kid. Maybe I can share with my kids. Right? No, none of that shit is share with my kids. It goes right on this display case. Don't touch it. I will kill you. Do not. I don't know. I didn't understand like how that goes, but that also goes to my next question. I've got two girls. I've got one that is 15 and I have one that is 12. And you said you've been doing this for the last 12 years, right? So you've read a lot of comics that relate to girls, or to girls that are, you know, in that phase of high school, of you know, that whole, you know, is there anything that, because they look at my comic books and they're like, oh, that's dad's thing, you know, but I would very much like to get them involved in something. Is there a good transitional comic that I could introduce them to? And I was thinking for like my 15-year-old, maybe like Paper Girls.
Girls is great. My dude,
Okay.
listen, I am like the expert for shit like this. All right.
Okay,
This is what I
give it to
live
me.
for.
Yes.
This is why I have a
Yes.
channel. Listen, DM me on Instagram later because I'm gonna give you a little sneak peek right now. But DM me on Instagram because I'm not kidding. I'm gonna give you a whole list. So that way, when Christmas comes around, you can buy a bunch of stuff.
Paper
So
Girls is awesome.
to make things really, really simple, anything published by First Second is great.
Mhm.
First Second is a great all ages publisher. Recently, I just read Snapdragon, which is probably my favorite, like, new to me comic book that I've read in 2022 because it was published back in 2020. It's about a young girl who is a person of color, which I think is phenomenal because we don't get enough of those, especially in the all ages book. But she's a young woman of color and she finds a witch that is like a roadkill witch. So here I go. So she learns from this witch, and this witch is like helping her like realize that she really likes animals and wants to be a veterinarian while also getting in touch with that witchy side. And it's also got a lot of really cool like gender roles and gender ideas in it that I think are great for that age. So anything published by First Second, there it is. Also too, the DC Comics original graphic novel line. Phenomenal for younger audiences. So they recently released a Poison Ivy book. There's Harley Quinn Breaking Glass, which is amazing. And they tend to range anywhere from being more so maybe for like your 11-year-old to being for your 15-year-old. But absolutely, Paper Girls, there it is.
Right.
You picked it right out of the hat.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to give you, I got to look at my shelves because I've got everything all up there. But listen, I've got a whole list for you. Listen, this is what I do. Okay.
You are that comic girl.
I am that comic girl, but I'm glad you asked that question because that's really why I created my channel, because you had a lot of people talking about their collections, talking about the most important book in their collection, the most expensive. A lot of people talking about what was happening with Marvel and DC and this and that. And I'm like, where are the recommendations for 15-year-old girls? Where are the recommendations for people that occasionally like reading comics and, you know, maybe want to read a comic here and there, but don't want to invest a bunch of time and money and shelf space? So what are some quick, easy, concise stories that I can pick up and I can enjoy without having that long-term investment? And that's why That Comic Girl, and by extension, Casually Comics, is so important to me, because I live by the motto that comic books are for everyone, okay? Comics are no different than any medium. Guys, I know I've said it already tonight. I'm going to repeat it. Comics are no different than video games, movies, TVs, and regular books. There is something out there for everybody. That being said, I'm still trying to get my mother to read her first comic book. She watches a lot of comic book inspired stuff. I know you're listening to me, but I'm still trying to get her to read her first comic book.
Now, did she watch your 10-1-1? Because I didn't see her in the chat that night.
She watched, so I was bad. I forgot to tell her that I was on the 10-1-1. She watched it the day after and immediately got yelled at that she wasn't invited to it. She loved it.
Well, she did her mom part.
She did her mom part.
She shamed her daughter.
You did.
Yeah. Mons, you didn't tell me you were going to be on there. What's wrong with you?
Mars, thank you so much for that. Because, yeah, like you said, you know, when I walk into my LCS and I ask for recommendations for my daughters, I get, you know, I walk in and I'm immediately at the door by people like Jim and you know, Gary here, who have their thumb inside their navel going, girls, no idea. You want to go check out, you know, any of this? It's like, no, gosh, you guys suck. You know what I mean? Like there's nobody that can relate in my circle of people. So it's hard for me to even try to discuss that. Like it's crazy because like with my girls, there's nothing that's off the table. You know what I mean? You tell me anything you need, you know, I got you, you know. You need me to go to the store to go get you pads, let me know, take a picture of it so this way I can get the correct one. I
love that.
And you know, it's like I have no shame in it. You know, I'll be on the phone as I'm going, super heavy, you saying what now? Super wings? Okay, wings, I got you. Okay. You know what I mean? Like things that I have no idea, but I have no shame because there's nothing that I wouldn't do for my girls. But now, in terms of me trying to connect with them into something that I love, there's been a big.
You have like a blind spot almost.
Exactly, because I'm so focused on what I like that I, I know what they like, but at the same time, it's like, where do I go to find what they like? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So thank you so much. That
Absolutely.
this is going to help so much.
Listen, I'm going to give you a big list because I know that I'm missing a bunch of really good books that I'm like, I want to scream about it. And Snapdragon is the one that I've been screaming about a lot recently. So we'll link
you
up.
put on the spot too.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, like I said,
I'm
I'm so much better when I can like look at my shelves and I can be like, okay, because like sometimes there's like books that I want to recommend and I'm like, well, there's like one age inappropriate scene, and depending on the individual, they might be okay with letting their kids see that.
No, she's watching Game of Thrones right now, and she's
okay.
like,
Well, if she's watching Game of Thrones, here's an easy one for her to get into. You don't even have to pay anything because I'm sure she has a smartphone. Have her read Lore Olympus on Webtoons.
Lore Olympus, okay.
It is on the Webtoons app. It is basically a retelling of the Greek pantheon and a retelling of the love story between Hades and Persephone. And it is modern and funny and gorgeous, and it's amazing. And I want everybody to read it. It's so good. They do have they have printed versions of it, but if she wants to just read it all now, it's right on her phone.
Okay. That might be the route that we go because, physical copies she's good with, but man, she can take that phone everywhere she goes.
Right.
So the shitter is the best place to just read everything.
Listen, your local library, I will protest it. Your local library is a great place, especially if you don't want to invest a lot of time, a lot of money. Maybe you want to introduce yourself to some characters you've never read before. Maybe you want to try out a book, but you don't know how you're going to feel about it and you don't want to waste the money. Support your local library because I know I wouldn't be reading Marvel if it wasn't for my library.
Right. My brother's the same way. He goes to he goes to the library and gets everything.
And that's something that people don't realize is that the library actually has trade paperbacks of a lot of the stories that we talk about,
and a lot of them now.
A lot of movies too.
Digital.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll touch here too on what Chris at Retro Rocket said because it's the same at my LCS. Make sure they have a good selection of books for kids of all ages. Many great empowering books for young girls, and there's tons. Because there's not even that. Now there's novels too. Like Marvel is putting out, like you can get Black Widow, Scarlet Witch. Mm-hmm. You have all these young adult novels that are out now too.
Yeah, and
some of which I may or may not have picked up and read for myself.
But that was so I'm glad Chris brought that up because that was one of my favorite parts. So that's something I value about a comic book shop is how inclusive is it? That's one of the reasons why the comic book shop located in Wilmington, Delaware here, not only was my go-to shop for the longest time, but it's probably still one of my favorite shops in the country that I have personally been to because Jen always talks about books with pictures and I want to go there. But the comic book shop is ran by a lot of women. It is female owned and it makes a important mark on being inclusive and inclusive to women of color, to queer people, to young people, old people, you name it. They're so friendly and inviting. And that was probably one of my favorite parts about working in a comic shop myself, which I did for about a year, was I would get people in off the streets that had never read a comic or somebody who, for example, when I was working, Umbrella Academy had just come out and people were like, yeah, I saw that Umbrella Academy show. Can you either give me that book or recommend something else that I can read? Because, Umbrella Academy sold out right away. Same with The Boys. The Boys sold out right away. So you would have these people that had never read a comic before coming in and asking for comics and then be like, okay, well, what other shows do you watch? What other movies do you watch? Do you play any video games? Is there anything that interests you in particular? And I would get to do what my friend did for me and walk these people through the shop, show them the books that they would love, tell them, of course, there's no obligation to buy it, but that these stories are always here for them to learn and love and grow with. So
that's awesome.
And also, I wanted to go back to something we touched on in the green room.
Mm-hmm.
Because you and Jim were having a good conversation about Comic Cons. How do you view Comic Cons? How do you think they relate to the industry as it is now? What do you think they need to change to better serve comics and not just multimedia such as television and movies.
Well, I think you hit that nail on the head there. Is Comic Cons need to go back to being comic conventions.
Right.
Too often than not, we see Comic Cons that are giant celeb fests. I'm looking at every like fan expo and Wizard World that exists in America. I'm also looking directly at San Diego Comic Con, which is what it's called, Comic Con, and New York Comic Con, who do not focus on comics. They focus on what new movies are coming out from Marvel, what new movies are coming out from Star Wars. And I'm just like, buddy, we need to focus on comics. And that's why I love Baltimore Comic Con as my favorite convention that I have been to. And I've been to a lot of cons on the East Coast, and I'm probably going to go to a lot more. But Baltimore Comic Con remains my favorite solely because it's about the comics.
Let me interject real quick.
Interject.
If
go
you
for
get
it.
a chance, go further south. Go to Charlotte. Go to Heroes Con.
I've been wanting to go to Heroes Con. That's on my bucket list.
We went in June. My brother and I went in June and met up with Mark from Legion and a whole bunch of different people in the community. And it might just edge out Baltimore a little bit. And it's because of the only
they
thing
have
that
good
Baltimore
guest lineup.
Yeah, the only thing that Baltimore has probably better is they might have a few more indie authors and artists and so forth than Heroes, but from a pure Comic-Con perspective, they're there. They do balance it out pretty good. They still have cosplay shows, but it's on like a whole other part of the building, and it's set up really well. So think about that one as one to hit. Absolutely.
That's been on my bucket list. I've been wanting to go further south because they show up at Baltimore, and every time they're at Baltimore, I'm like, oh, I gotta go to Heroes Con. They're just great, and I always see the guest list every year, and I'm like, I want to go. But Baltimore is about the comics, and Bearded Comic Bro, I got to meet him for the first time at Baltimore Comic Con, which was amazing. And that's why I really like conventions now that I'm doing YouTube and Instagram and talking with people, because now I get to meet all the people that I talk with and hang out with online. It's amazing. But Greg had made a comment that he had never been to a convention that was so comic focused.
Right.
Because there were no media guests last year. Okay, I lied. There was one media guest from Baltimore Comic Con last year, and it was literally the girl from Jaws who gets eaten in the beginning.
Yeah, that does.
That is the only media guest that they had. So I'm like, okay, you get a pass on that because it's not a real media guest. It's fine.
Right.
But it's just comics. It's some of the best comic vendors. It's some of the best comic creators, and they get a really great diverse lineup. Of course, you have those locals like Tom King that go every year because he just takes a train in. But then you have, like this year, they're having Brian Michael Bendis, and it's like Brian Michael Bendis is from Portland, so that's kind of a big deal that he's coming all the way out. And I just really like it. It's really fun. And Baltimore in particular always has a booth that has $5 trade paperbacks, and this is the first fucking booth I hit every year. So if you're going to Baltimore Comic Con this year, you just have to go to the carpet or the booth with the big red carpet. I will be there because it is the booth I hit first, and then I regret it because I'm carrying around 40 books all day.
That should be your last run, Mars. I mean, come on.
I have to make sure that I get the books first.
Well, just tell them to put it to the side. Say, listen, I'm Mars. Put this to the side for me. You know I'm going to come and get this.
I'm here to spend an undisclosed amount of money because my mother is watching. Please.
An undisclosed amount of money.
Actually, I want to see a good Mars Rage article. Don't you know who I am?
Yeah, right. Don't you know who I am?
Mars, I was totally with you until you mentioned Greg. Ugh. Bearded Comic.
Listen, that's my boy.
Listen,
no, I love Greg, but man,
you know Justin, right? No Good Comics.
So Justin was there last year, but we had just missed each other because I was only there for a day.
I'm sure. I guarantee you he's going to be there again because his dad is going to have a table.
Oh, really?
Yeah, his father was an artist for DC and Marvel. Greg LaRoche.
He doesn't disclose that.
Wait.
No, he does.
Whoa.
He does. He tells everything.
Yeah, he's had his dad on his show. Yeah.
And he was at in Hershey, Pennsylvania at the con. I almost went to it up to Hershey, Pennsylvania to the small con up there, and he was up there saying, "Hey, my dad's up here. If you want to come and say hi to him."
Greg, No Good Comics dad is Greg LaRoche.
Yep.
I've hung out with Greg LaRoche. How did I not know this? what the fuck?
Anyway, so wrap that in, take that back, and just
this industry is so fucking small. It's not even funny. Like, I fucking love that. That to me just blew my mind. But
so now she's gonna DM Justin.
I'm gonna DM Justin, and I'm gonna be like, hey, why didn't you tell me that your dad is fucking
Digger Jim said this, and is this true? Yeah.
That's fucking nuts. No, but Baltimore, I plan on being there for 2 days this year. I just got approved for a guest pass. I'm really excited about that. So I feel all fancy, and I'm like, oh, I'm actually going somewhere. Yay. But I'm excited to go to Baltimore for 2 days again. One day that I can dedicate to just buying a bunch of stuff. Another day that I can kind of dedicate to hanging out with friends from YouTube, friends from Instagram, hanging out with pals in the industry that I've met over the past years, because Jim Starlin's going in this year. And if you've never met Jim Starlin, he's probably the coolest guy you'll ever hang out with. And I love that dude to itty bitty pieces.
Yeah. My brother and I went to GalaxyCon also in Richmond, because that's where I'm from. And he was there, and Mike Grell was there. And Mike Grell was a trip to sit there and talk to. I mean, he would talk to you while he was doing the art, and they just have the best stories. You just hear about stuff that you're like, you're not going to hear, unless you're hanging out with them.
I'm excited because Mike Grell just got announced for Baltimore Comic Con, and I met Mike Grell about 5 years ago, because Gary already knows this. I am like the world's biggest Green Arrow fan. Like, that is my dude. I love Green Arrow. So getting to meet Mike Grell, I had my little stack of books. We talked about it a lot. And he joked with me that I could be his Dinah Lance. And I was like, Mike Grell wants me to be his Dinah Lance, because, my hair was short like it was back then. And Mike Grell's run of Black Canary, Mike Grell's run of Green Arrow, Black Canary has black hair, and she's still wearing the wig. And I'm like, Mike Grell asked me to be his Black Canary. I can die happy now. Thank you so much.
And here you go, Mars. So here's one of the stories that he told me when I was waiting for him to finish his sketch and so forth. He said that one time, and I think I'm saying this right, I hope so. One time, DC went to him and said, listen, we love that you're killing it on, Green Arrow. We want to do something. We want to do a crossover,
because he helped revolutionize that character.
Right. We want to do a crossover with, like, I think he said, like, Green Arrow. How can we Green Arrow and Warlord from what was it? Warlord from Mars or something?
Warlord
like
from
that,
Mars
or whatever.
No, just Warlord was his
Warlord.
character.
Yeah, and he's like, how can we get them together? He's like, you can't. They're not in the same place. But he's like, and besides, it's hard for me. I draw one type of face with the goatee, and that's it. So don't try to mix them up. He told him, no, we're not going to do that. But they were pushing for him to try to do a crossover. He's like, you can't cross them over. Yeah, he got very bent on it. Yeah, that's right, Skitaris or something like that. Warlord from Skitaris. But my brother probably remembers the story better. But yeah, he's a trip.
He's great.
And he did. My brother and I both like Legion of Superheroes growing up, and he did a lot of great art on that. So, but absolutely, now I know where Mars is going to be. John, we're going to have to go find the $5 trades. My brother will be down for that. He'll be right there with you. He got when he came up last year, we went to it. He first up, he's like, I'm going this way. Where are you going? I'm like, where are you going? He's like, I'm Brian K. Bond. Paper Girls. I have this book. He's like, I'm getting it signed, and so can I tell my Brian K. Vaughan story?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yes. All right. So probably the same year that you were there, Brian K. Vaughan was at Baltimore Comic Con. I flipped the fuck out. I was so excited. I said, I need to meet Brian K. Vaughan. This is at like the height of like my Saga obsession. I was like, yes. So I had gotten that, and I got Pride of Baghdad signed, which was really cool. And he kind of like laughed with me. He's like, I haven't signed one of these in years, because everybody at the time was bringing him Paper Girls and Saga, which I also had in my bag. So we're talking, and this is when I wasn't doing YouTube yet, but I had been doing like journalist stuff on my own personal website, and I had my little business cards. And I had given him one of my business cards, and I was like, I would love to chat with you about some like Saga stuff and whatnot. And he's like, yeah, of course. And like, we talked a little bit more. So he's like looking at my business card, and he's like flipping it around, because, on the front it says That Comic Girl, but on the back it says Mars. And he's like, well, it says Marsden and then Mars. And quotation marks. And he's like, is that your real name? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like looking at it. And then he circles it. And he sticks it in his breast pocket. And I'm like, are you? Because Brian K. Vaughan, there's stories about Brian K. Vaughan that he takes people's names that he meets at conventions and he puts them in his books.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at him and I'm like, are you going to put me in Saga? And I was just being a smartass at that time because I knew what he did with people's names. And I'm like,
right.
Are you going to put me in Saga? And he looks at me and he like gives this grin and he's like, it depends. He's like, are you okay with dying? And I was like, buddy, if you got to kill me to put me in Saga, listen, I will be the first to jump in line. Please kill me. So I'm still waiting because Saga finally came back in February and I haven't shown up yet. But listen, when I finally do show up in Saga, you heard it here first. I am probably going to die in the issue.
But with a smile on, because
with the biggest smile you ever saw.
Yeah, right. That's awesome. That's a great story. That's one of
my favorite con stories. I never tell that one enough.
Yeah.
I want to go back to Little Mars for a minute.
Oh,
so we all know the cartoons.
Baby comic Mars.
Yeah, because we all knew what we grew up watching cartoon wise. Were you big on cartoons in your house?
Oh my God, you have no idea.
Yeah,
you have no idea.
So what cartoons had you hooked? What were you watching?
So, stereotypically, I watched Sailor Moon a lot. Not only because they were cute magical girls, but because one of the main characters was named Sailor Mars. And it was the first time I had ever heard my name uttered on TV. Yes, it was my nickname, but it was the first time I ever heard my name uttered on TV. So of course I latched onto that. But I grew up watching a lot of weird stuff. I grew up watching, Pokemon. I grew up watching Yu-Gi-Oh! And Digimon. And then when I became a teenager, weird shows like Code Lyoko would pop up that I would watch and get really into. But then again, I watched X-Men, Batman the Animated Series, Wolverine and the X-Men was one of my favorites as a teenager growing up. Same with Avatar The Last Airbender. My mother's rolling her eyes at this point because to this day I'm still trying to get her to watch Avatar The Last Airbender. That was probably one of my favorites growing up, and that's the one that really taught me what pristine storytelling was in media.
We watched that. Nice. Absolutely.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned Brian Michael Bendis earlier? Did you read Joy? Because I really liked that book a lot. It was 4 issues last year, Joy, and I thought it was one that a lot of people missed out on. It was an indie.
I did not read it, and is this the part where I admit I'm not a huge fan of Brian Michael Bendis?
He's one of those creators that's hit or miss for me. If something hits, it hits. If it misses, it misses.
I think a lot of the characters that he has created, characters like Miles Morales, characters like I think was he responsible for Riri Williams? I can't remember if he was responsible for Riri. I know he was responsible for Miles. But even characters like Jessica Jones, I love a lot of the characters that he's written. Unfortunately, a lot of his storytelling comes off very flat and comes off very, for me, generic. If you look at what a superhero comic is supposed to be, it's a Brian Michael Bendis story. I need writers who do write superhero books to kind of push the bounds of storytelling with superheroes, and I think that's kind of why I like Tom King as much as I do, because he takes a superhero story and makes it an indie comic sometimes.
Got it.
That's why I like him.
All right, so then what's your best pushing the boundaries story as far as superheroes go?
Well, I was going to ask that too, but story wise for superhero comics, not so much indie comics, but you got Tom King, Tom Taylor, all these different. Who are your top 5?
My top 5 writers?
Yeah, that are superhero writers, not not in your indie world side.
So definitely Tom Taylor.
Okay.
Definitely. So I'm gonna put Tom King at the bottom. I'm gonna put him at number 5 because that man's hit or miss for me. Okay. So Tom Taylor, Judd Winnick. Absolutely love the work.
Sure.
I wish Judd Winnick would come back. Like, listen, chef kiss.
Yeah, Outsiders, right on.
His Green Arrow run, that's it for me. That's the superhero run. That's the best of all time.
Okay.
So Judd Winnick, Tom Taylor, Gail Simone.
Oh, my brother's doing backflips with you right now.
Gail Simone is the big one for me. We'll put Tom Taylor in as my or not Tom Taylor. Tom King is my number 5, and I guess for number 4, man, this is hard for me because I feel like I've definitely shifted away from reading a lot of like big 2 comics, and I'm now reading a lot of indie comics. So I'm just gonna cheat real quick. We're gonna cheat. You know what? Jimmy Palmiotti.
Okay.
Jimmy Palmiotti and Amanda Connor, especially their work on like Power Girl.
See, I told you.
And they're doing a Red Sonja book right now too.
They are doing a Red Sonja book. Yeah, they did one previously, I think, too.
Now, we touched upon this, and I think this audience will enjoy it. We touched upon this on the 10-1-1. But we
touched on a lot of stuff on the 10-1-1s. Right. Now I'm scared.
But where did this love for Green Arrow come from, and what connects you so strongly to the character?
That's actually a really good question because I don't know where this love for Green Arrow came from. Oh my God. Like, that's actually, I've never actually had to sit and think about it because one day the Emerald Archer just walked into my life and I never looked back.
Kind of like Panda and Turtles.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't help it.
So okay, I'm gonna not look at Jen's comment. It's kind of up there. So it's gonna sound really
we'll highlight her
because it's funny because somebody like Oliver Queen, that's not my typical aesthetic. Like, listen, I don't lust after blonde men. It does not happen. I like bearded men. I love men with beards. I will never date a man who does not have a beard. But I don't like to date blondes, and I've never dated a blonde, and I never will date a blonde. But I think what I love about Green Arrow, and by extension Oliver Queen, is I love how political he gets. Like, politics are rooted deep into his character. You know, we look at books like Neil Adams and Denny O'Neill's run, where he looks at Green Lantern. He's like, listen, pal, you literally have the power of aliens and gods, but yet you won't help out the black man next door who's begging for help. He's like, you know what? We're going to jump in my truck and we're going to take a little road trip and we're going to help those that are less fortunate. And, you know, I love the idea that Oliver Queen is a rich white man, but he is willing to put his money where his mouth is and help those in need. I always call him, and I think I said this on the 10-1-1, I love Oliver Queen because he's the anti-Batman. Like, he has the same powers, the same money that Batman does. He may not have the brains that Batman does because Oliver Queen is the definition of a himbo, but he is willing to help those in need. He's willing to put the money out there. He's willing to build charities and foundations. And we see this, I feel like, in all iterations of Green Arrow.
He's willing to make real change.
He's willing to make real change, and that's what I like about him. We've seen that evolve. So like I said, it started with Denny O'Neill and Neil Adams. We saw it continue with Mike Grell and move with Kevin Smith and Judd Winnick, and eventually follow into the Rebirth era with Benjamin Percy and him literally rescuing homeless children and creating, you know, a lack of a better word, camp in the middle of the woods. So that way homeless people had a place to stay and thrive and sustain off of, you know, their own energy and their own resources. And I love that man. I love everything that he does. I mean, my favorite part in any Green Arrow comic is during the Judd Winnick and Phil Hester line. And I actually think this is when Andrew McLean took over, or not Andrew McLean, not Andy Parks. I don't know who it is, but somebody else took over for Phil Hester after Phil Hester did like 70 issues. Oliver Queen at this point in time has become mayor of Star City. Mm-hmm. He decides that he is going to marry gay people. And apparently the council of Star City and other politicians in Star City are like, you can't do that. And he's like, well, excuse me, based on this accordance of law that was written in 1776, it says that the mayor can marry whoever they want within, Star City limits. And he announces it to the camera that he will be at the courthouse steps every Thursday from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. and will be willing to marry any queer couple who comes his way. And I'm like, that's it. That's the moment that made me fall in love with him. I love him.
And then the CW broke your heart with him.
And then the CW broke my heart. It's fine.
They gave you Green Batman.
I kind of feel like that the new Nightwing book is doing a little bit of the same thing in respect to he's trying to take over Bloodhaven and turn it back for the people and take care of the people. Setting up the different centers,
the Alfred Foundation.
Yeah, the Alfred Ford Foundation. So I'm kind of getting that same vibe, and that's probably one of my top books.
That is my favorite. That is 100% my favorite book right now. I feel like that's just Tom Taylor's vibe. That's kind of like what he does, because he's doing very similar work in Superman Son of Kal-El, which is probably my second favorite DC book, if not those two interchangeably change depending on what month it is. It really does.
I didn't pick that one up. I decided I was going to work on Nightwing for a little bit. I wanted to see how this run was going to go. And I can see how Green Arrow would do that. It's so funny because you're while you were talking and we were talking about cartoons, they had the Justice League cartoon, and the very first episode has your boy in it.
It does.
And he makes a comment to Batman saying, I don't want to be in this league. Look, we're on a space station. I'm for the little guy.
Yep.
And the funny thing is Batman looks at him and says, the big guys have a way of stepping on the little guys. That's why we need you here to help us keep us corrected.
Yeah.
And of course, and then he saw, Black Canary, pulling up her boots and everything. And he was like, oh, look at that.
I will say Justice League Unlimited did play a lot into my love for not only Green Arrow, but Black Canary, because I was watching Justice League Unlimited at the time that I was reading or getting into the Green Arrow comics. And I can tell you right now, my favorite episode from Justice League Unlimited, it's that double date episode. I love seeing Green Arrow and Black Canary together. Yeah. I love seeing the Question and Huntress together. Honestly, any episode that has Green Arrow and Black Canary as the main stars, that's probably my favorite Justice League Unlimited episode. It really is.
When you were saying the whole thing, I thought to myself, this is just like that cartoon.
Yep.
100%. So,
now, did you watch the old Birds of Prey TV series that lasted a season?
I've never watched it, and at this point, I'm too afraid to.
Oh, it's not as bad as you would think.
I have a very hard time. I have a very hard time with turning my brain off and being like, well, this person's hair color is different, so it can't possibly be my comic book. I'm getting better with it. So let's give a prime example, because my partner is listening, and I know if I don't talk about it, he's going to call me out for it later. So prime example is the Black Widow movie. I did not want to see the Black Widow movie. I was like, why do we need a Black Widow movie? We get to the theater. The first 5 minutes of this movie, they basically state that the Red Guardian is Black Widow's dad. And I'm like, that's not how it happens in the comics. That's her husband. What the hell is this? It's going to be the worst movie ever made. That movie is one of my favorite MCU movies, believe it or not. It is a comfort movie to me. I genuinely just enjoy watching it.
I like it too, and it gets so much hate.
I just like watching it. I like the found family. I like that they kind of reinvented it, and I kind of wish that we got to see that in the comics now.
And Natasha's so badass when she busts her nose at the end. And
literally 5 minutes in, and I'm like, this is going to be the worst movie ever made because it's her dad, not her husband. And then, fooling me that, it ended up being one of my favorites. So, yeah, I'm getting better. I'm getting there.
Oh, we were talking about Green Lantern or Green Arrow being one of your favorite characters, but we know that you have such an eclectic taste, and for us guys, it just feels like some of us are so focused. You know what I mean? Like Gary B with Conan and Red Sonja, and Digger Jim with Digger Jim stuff. Like he's got a lot of X-Men.
I'm a big X-Men person. I like X-Men.
But and I've got Turtles, but with you having such an eclectic, taste, like what is your considered grail? Like what is something that you want in your collection that you're like, this is it. If I die tomorrow, knowing that this was in my collection, like I could just die.
Good question.
Do we want the realistic one or the one that I will never obtain?
Well, we want both.
Both, because seriously, I never thought I would ever own a TMNT #1 ever in my entire life. And I swear to God, Bobby De La Ghetto from this community A-okay'd me a TMNT #1. Now, I just saying that right now, it's already breaking me up. But just to think that you would never get it, you can't say that's never going to be in the realm of possibility. Like,
never say never.
Go for it. Which one do you think is the one for you? And then which one do you think you can get, like, realistically? But let's go with the big one first.
So the big one, now that I'm thinking about it, I feel like I have two big ones that I'll never be able to obtain. So the first one is definitely, since we're on the topic of Green Arrow, and I can't think of the number because I'm terrible with numbers sometimes, but More Fun Comics, his first appearance. And the reason I won't get that is because, listen, it's a double whammy, because not only is it his first appearance, but it's also the first appearance of Aquaman. So you've got two heavy hitters, and that's like a triple digit book sometimes. So I'm like, okay, I would like to be able to just hold it, because I've been able to I've held, a Sensation Comics. I've held a Detective Comics. I would like to be able to just hold Green Arrow's first appearance and take a picture, and I'd be happy with it. I would also really, really love to own X-Men 4. This one is the one that I know the number 4, and Jen should be proud of me. I would like to own X-Men 4 because it's the first appearance of Scarlet Witch. Now, realistically, there's a bunch, because I find new characters that I'm in love with almost weekly. So like She-Hulk #1, I would love to own. Emma Frost's first appearance. Again, I'm terrible with numbers and knowing sometimes what books they are. NYX, the first appearance of Laura Kinney. I feel like that is the big realistic, maybe one day I can afford it. That I would absolutely love to own. But there's so many out there. But I'm also so thankful because, me and Gary talked about this a little bit on 1011. I already own so many of these books that I never thought I would get to. Like first appearances of Black Canary, first appearances of Granny Frickin' Goodness. These are books that I never thought I would get to own, and I did it. First appearance of Amanda Waller. Like, sometimes the books that I really want are those really stupid, obscure characters that nobody else wants, so I get lucky.
Like me with Dazzler. Nobody wants Dazzler, except Jim and I.
Just me and Gary.
It's like, for example, first appearance of Hush. Years ago, you could probably get 1 million copies of the first appearance of Hush, which I rightfully do. I own multiple copies of the first appearance of Hush because I'm psychotic and I love Thomas Elliot. He's my favorite character. But nowadays, it's like $100 a book.
Yeah.
Will I ever part with those? Absolutely not, because they're mine and that's the love of my life, and nobody will ever love him more than I do. So why should anybody else get to own them?
There you go, Mars.
Oh, is that the first big Barda?
It's the I think it's it's the Furies, the first appearance of the Furies.
Oh my God.
This is number 6.
And there it is. That's another one.
Wonderful cover.
That's another one.
Wonderful cover.
Like I do. And I feel like I've been collecting comics for 12 years, which doesn't sound like a lot of time, especially when, I have 3 lovely gentlemen sitting next to me who have been doing this for a lot longer. But I feel like I've gotten to a point where, in terms of those single issues, those dollar issues, I own a lot of what I want. There's not much else for me out there. It used to be when I would go to conventions, I would have lists for characters. And now I don't have as big of lists. So now I'm willing to save, and I'm willing to spend a little bit more money on, say, a first appearance of a character that I really, really love. So.
Yeah, I like your story on the 10-1 worm where that gentleman gave you he gave you a book, and I don't remember what it was, and he was just like, just knowing that you liked it.
It was
What he sketched
League 74. I don't know the number, but it was the first appearance of Black Canary.
Right, and the fact that you were, I like that story, because sometimes that's better than money. Knowing you hear people say this sometimes. It was where it needed to be. I gave this to this person because this is a person that will appreciate it. It's where it needed to be, and that really, that resonates.
Right time,
with
right
me.
place. It really is.
It really does. So.
Well, same here, Chris. I have the whole Dazzler run, plus I have the graphic novel that goes with it. And I got her first appearance and her number 1, both signed by Jim Shooter.
Oh, that's exciting.
Nice.
Yeah.
He's another one that's a talker. He'll talk your ears off too if he's available to. He gets handled too much now.
Well, when he was at Empire, when he was at the Empire Comic Fest here, which my artist friend Ken Wheaton runs,
right?
I got to walk him in, so that's what I got to do fun that day. I got to go meet him at the car they brought him in and walk him in, have a conversation, and get a few books signed for nothing.
That's dope.
Now, I'm going to ask you a fun question because we've done a lot of series.
Everything's been fun.
But I'm going to ask this one for Rob because it's Rob's stable question when he's on the show.
This is good.
So, but curious about you. So I'm gonna put on my Rob stash and get going with it. So, being an established comics reader and having a great knowledge of the characters and an understanding of what makes them who they are. DC and Marvel, the big two, both reach out to you, and they have a few characters in crisis that they need reworked. You get to pick one character from each company and fix that character. What character is broken from each company, and which character are you going to fix? And
how? It's the character that's broken, not the character I want to write.
No. This is you have
you can tell us that one too.
Yeah,
why stop there? But
right?
Who are you going to fix?
I wonder if this counts. I wonder if this counts. I'm going to stretch it a little bit. So, my DC pick is Granny Goodness. Ooh. Listen, she's broken because she's not in any comics. And not only is she not in any comics, she does not have a backstory. So I know that we talked a little bit before in the beginning about my want and desire to write comic books and how I am focusing on indie comic books. That being said, if DC Comics is listening to me, listen, I have already plotted, scripted, planned a 4-issue miniseries for Granny Goodness.
Granny Goodness.
If you would like a Granny Goodness story, hit your girl up because I'm ready to hear her origin story and I'm here to write it. So does that count? Does that count that she's broken because she's not in comics?
Yes. An underutilized character is a broken character.
Yeah. It's a broken character because she's not in comics.
Absolutely.
In terms of Marvel's hard because I'm still new to Marvel. And I don't know of any characters that are broken per se. I guess no, because that's just the character that I would want to write.
Well, who is it?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it would be Scarlet Witch, obviously, but I feel like she's not broken. So I feel like maybe the broken character, because we're gonna kind of twist the word broken here.
Okay.
I would like a shot at a fun Emma Frost story because the only Emma Frost solo series that we got was done by Greg Horn, and it felt like a teenage boy's fetish. So to me, that is broken.
Oh, yeah.
So
I loved it.
I think we need.
I was gonna say his art is 100% that.
I did too, but let's bring Miss Emma into the modern era.
Right.
Let's maybe not necessarily feminize her and do that, but like let's make her badass. Let's make her mentally challenging, a force to be reckoned with because she's proven in mainline X titles and spinoffs that she is. But I would like a solo series that kind of flushes that out.
And keep her with your favorite X guy, Cyclops, right? No, just
I'm
kidding.
gonna put her with me. I'm gonna write me into the comic, and so it's gonna be a self-insert fan fiction Mars X Emma Frost. It's gonna be great. It's gonna sell millions of copies. It's gonna go to multiple printings, retailer exclusive variants, an acetate cover.
Oh yes,
cover.
I cannot wait to put that on the second market out there.
Oh yeah, can't wait. That's awesome. No, I think that's and I mean, circle back to Scarlet Witch too, man. I mean, you could do a well, they don't even do 4-part stories anymore. It's like you gotta deep dive into 12, maybe 6 at most, and say, all right.
I miss the 4-issue minis.
Yeah, I do too, but they don't do them anymore. But do a 6-part story on the Scarlet Witch, on how she's coming to terms with the loss of the Vision. And,
I mean, that would be great. I think 2 of the things from Marvel that I would really like to see is give me my Wolverine family book. Let me just have a book where Logan, Laura, Gabby, and Dakin, I never know how to pronounce his name. It's fine. Right. I know who I'm talking about. Just let them let them just kind of road trip together and get into trouble, kind of like Secret Six. I think that could be fun. I also really want to pitch like a magical girl Justice League Dark-esque story for Marvel with characters like Scarlet Witch,
right?
Brother Voodoo, Magic, Madeline Pryor. I think that if we were to focus the Magic characters together, and do a really cool like introspective story, I think that would be really fun.
My boy Dale would love, Magic to be up in that, because Magic, she's amazing. Yes,
I thought she was kind of cool in the New Mutants movie too.
She was. She was the best part of the whole movie.
She was the best part, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I like the main character a lot. I thought she was great too.
The main character whose name you can't remember?
Because I'm on the spot. That's why. Yeah. I know it's Danny Moonstar, right? But I can't remember her superhero name.
No.
Yeah. Because I'm old, Mars, so when I go to tell people stuff, it leaves my head immediately, and then I got to stutter about it.
Yeah. Come on, give us a break.
No, just kidding.
No.
I thought that movie was underappreciated, though. I really thought New Mutants was fun.
I feel like I would have enjoyed it more if I didn't watch New Mutants at a time where I didn't have any air conditioning and it was 104 degrees outside. Ooh. Maybe I would have enjoyed it more at that point. Maybe it needs a rewatch for me.
Well, I thought it was a good setup, and I thought there was a lot of places for the characters to go, which we'll unfortunately never see from that now.
Yeah.
But, all right, so we'll start wrapping up here. We'll get our last questions out. So we'll go. My last question is, who do you want to see in a movie or TV show that hasn't been adapted yet?
Oh, so this doesn't include bad adaptions that just need a remake? Cough, cough.
No, it can. Just
cough, cough. Green Arrow deserves the redemption. Cough, cough. No, but in all seriousness, I really, and there's been speculation behind it. Gail Simone, please stop teasing me and giving me hope. I would sell my soul for a Secret Six movie. I just think that it could be a lot of fun. I think it could be really cool. I think it could be just really, really, it could be a great companion piece to the Suicide Squad movie. That being said, I also would like to see Hush finally show up on the big screen. Listen, Batman has a million characters. I'm tired of seeing the Joker pop up. I'm tired of seeing the Riddler pop up. I don't care about the Penguin. Give me Hush. Let me have some fun. Let me have a good time. Let me be the one person in the audience that knows who that character is.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Panda, did you have anything else, sir?
Yeah. So we were talking about how, 8 years, 12 years ago, how your interests change, throughout that time period. And I just can't wait until we see something published by you and seeing it out there, whether it is the hugest hit or if it just sells within our community. Either way, just having it out in the ether, you know, to look back on when 10 years from now, you're going to be like, oh, that's where I started. This is,
Right.
you know, like that's where the nostalgia thing is going to go too, you know, like, oh, this is what I was thinking at that time. And this is what I was going through. And I cannot wait to see what is in store for you in your future, and for what your writing is going to do for comics in the future, because I have no doubt that you will be doing something in this industry in some shape or form. Gary, I don't have a question. I just wanted to say
that's a good statement.
He just wanted to suck up. That's what that was. Hey, Mars, I want to suck up here. I had a legitimate thing. My question was, where do you see yourself in the next, I don't know, 3 years, 5 years? Do you legitimately feel like you might? I mean, I feel like I'm getting a vibe of there's a lot of stories that you need to tell. You just need to be pushed to get them out there.
I agree. Thank you. Thank you for encouraging me.
And that's what I'm trying to.
I need to be bonked in the head and be like, come up with an ending, you stupid idiot. Stop thinking everything needs to be perfect.
Right.
Donnie Cates doesn't do anything with his
hell no. I was getting ready to say that. Donnie Cates is ruining Hulk with no problem. So I feel like you need to forget the whole perfection thing and just get that little.
And that's the thing. Like, I don't want to be that type of person. I don't want to be that type of person where I bash other people's work. But, you know, being on Casually Comics, we read a lot of comics, and sometimes the comics we read are not very good. And sometimes I read a book, and I won't say anything in specific, because again, I'm not here to bash people's art and their life work. But sometimes I read a book, and I'm like, how the fuck did this get published? Yeah, what I've written, because I'm not gonna lie, there are certain sequences where I'm like, damn, this is good, and damn, I think people would really enjoy this. And I'm like, how is this published? But I'm not. What the fuck is going on here? But realistically, I've been saying I've been wanting to write comics for 5-6 years now, and it hasn't happened. Partially because I have not pushed myself, and I need to start pushing myself, because if I don't, it's never going to happen. You know, it's not going to magically fall from the sky into my lap. Boom, here, publish a book. So I need to definitely work on that and push those stories more. Realistically, even if I don't become a writer, I would love to work in editing. I would absolutely love to work in editing, work in marketing with some of these, you know, comic book companies. You know, we joke about the comic book influencer. I want to be that type of person that's at, like, maybe not San Diego Comic-Con, because that scares the shit out of me, but I want to be the type of person that's at conventions moderating panels. I want to be the type of person that's there interviewing creators about their books, pushing out these books so that way people get hyped up about them, you know, but also just editing those books, you know, and getting them to where they need to be. And it's so weird, because when you talk to people and you're like, yeah, I want to write, or I want to illustrate, you know, obviously the step that you take is you write something, you illustrate something, you pitch it to a publisher. How do you break in as an editor? How do you show proof of editing? It's such an awkward, part of comic books.
Yeah.
That is probably one of the most important part of comic books, you know?
Right. Well,
because a lot of people don't realize that editors are the one to greenlight stories. Editors are the one who chooses who's on a comic book cover, who matches artists and writers together. One of my favorite stories that I learned, and it was part of the reasons why I wanted to be an editor, because sometimes I have great ideas, but I just can't write them out. And that's kind of what an editor does. But, you know, I met Greg Pak a couple years ago. And at the time I had just kind of learned about World War Hulk and what World War Hulk was, and was like, God damn, this is a good story. And we were talking about it. And he's like, do you want to know how I wrote that book? And I'm like, how, Greg? Tell me. He's like, my editor literally came to me and said, you're making Hulk a gladiator. That was all I was given, was Hulk is going to be a gladiator in space. Fill in the blanks. And that happens a lot with books that people don't realize. And I wish that more writers would talk about that, especially when we look at the big two, because you have those creators that are like, oh, I've been wanting to touch this character for years. And, you know, it was just right moment, right time. But then there's other people that get thrown characters that maybe they never would have thought of and are like, do this with this character, fill in the blanks. And it ends up becoming a hit. I want to be that person that is like, do this, do that, make it a hit.
Right.
Like George Perez with Teen Titans. and then he didn't want to leave the book.
Right. But you know what? The thing about the editor is it goes both ways. You make a hit. Sometimes you put people together that make duds. You have to be willing to take both. But I think more than anything, you just have to have a lot of time invested in a company where they see, you know, this person has written a lot. They've coordinated a lot with other authors. This is the person we need to put into the seat to help run the ship.
Yeah.
So that said, that's a long-term thing. I just hope that I'm going back to what Panda said. We can, and I'm say we as a community can start sending little DMs to Mars. Mars, where are you at with this story? Mars,
right?
You know, and because I'm gonna be honest with you, Mars, for real, there are a lot of people out here and in the community that go, oh, check out my exclusive. Okay, here's my Grim Reaper exclusive. Do you know why? Because I put my name on the back of it. They didn't write the book; they supported the book, and I'm okay with that. I want to say, hey man, this book is by you know, I met this person. This chick wrote it. It is awesome. You know, I want that.
Yes.
Okay, I want that. Just like when Gary had Jason Douglas on. You know, he wrote that book. I mean, I got to meet him in Baltimore. Great. You know, so we're gonna start tonight. I'm gonna
be
set
bullied.
up
Please bully me.
Bullying Mars. This is the Bullying Mars. Everybody send a DM every once in a while to her on Instagram.
Well, let's also bully DC. Clipped a part of this show.
Yeah.
Where Mars says she wants to write Granny Goodness and she has a pitch.
Right.
And send it up to DC and give her a little more pressure to write it and get it done.
That's not a bad idea.
You want to
talk about? Are we doing Black Label?
Yeah, Black Label, definitely.
So here's the thing. Okay, let me go back. So when I first concepted this book, Black Label wasn't a thing. Now that Black Label is a thing, I'm like, oh, I can push the boundaries a little bit more, and I can get a little more like I can get a little bit more like Game of Thrones in space with this shit. Like, let me do this stuff. Listen, y'all want to hear my pitch for Granny Goodness? DM me. I can't talk about it on air because I don't want to put it in the universe and have DC steal it and then be upset because that has happened before. I want
no. Keep it on the DL.
No, it's gonna be on the DL. But listen, you want to talk about dream things? Like if I could make one comic book wish, what is your comic book wish? It would be DC is literally like, here's your green, here's your Granny Goodness miniseries. Publish it. That's my dream.
Now, you said you're going to write it. Who would be your dream artist to conceptualize your work?
Oh, listen, I never got that far because, again, baby comic Mars, this is never going to happen. So I just described my Granny Goodness origin story as like a Game of Thrones in space.
Mm-hmm.
So the only person right now that comes to mind for Game of Thrones in space is Stephanie Hans.
Oh, she's good.
Who was on Die and on Batwoman. That's the only person that comes to mind. It's got to be something that's not traditional comic book and more fantasy oriented for me.
We'll get some nice Julie Bell covers too.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Julie Bell. My God. Her and her husband. Oh, my gosh.
Vallejo?
Yeah, Boris Vallejo. Those two combined together. Oh my gosh.
Amazing.
Talk about sci-fi and 70s and 80s and 90s. Like I grew up with Boris Vallejo and Julie Bell. Like their anatomy is sorry. Anyways, that would be my dream.
That would be your dream.
I don't know how well they draw turtles, but
yeah.
I'm sure they can do them just fine.
Yeah.
Right.
That's fine.
All right, so guys, we've been going for an hour and 45 minutes. It's been absolutely awesome.
It's been a blast.
We're going to cut it here, though, so it's at least digestible for the audience on the rewatch. This is absolutely fantastic.
Come on. This is a short episode of Casually Comics. You got to hit that 2 hour
right?
mark.
Oh, I know. You guys go for a while. But I do want to thank, first, my co-hosts, Jim and Adrian. Nice to have you back on again, sir. Really appreciate you both coming on. I want to thank the audience who came out to support the show and, more importantly, came out to support Mars's appearance on the show. And, of course, the biggest thank you goes out to Mar to Mars for agreeing to come on my stupid little channel twice. Thank you so much for coming on my channel and being a gracious, great guest both times. And not just being a good guest, but knocking it out of the park both times. Your commentary is great. Your passion's amazing. And every time you're talking books, it's absolutely 100% worth listening to. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Such a fun time.
Yes, thank you.
That means a lot to me. Because listen, sometimes I feel like that bubble-headed idiot who says way too much and doesn't shut up. So to hear you validate me, not once, but twice, makes me really, really happy. So thank you so much for having me. I told you this last time on the 1011. Your show, your channel is an absolute blast in a glass. For all you Jersey Shore people that watch and know my reference, congratulations to you. You're blast in a glass, but this is really amazing and it's great. And thank you so much for having me again, not once but twice.
Don't worry, you can come on anytime you want. You're always welcome. So, Jim, what's coming up on your channel, sir?
I have some packages coming in. I'll do an unboxing of a few books that I picked up. No major grails, but some stuff that I want to give away eventually. I need to do a shout out video. Haven't done. I found some channels I want to shout out, so I'll be doing that. And I'm trying to work on something that I may have to get another camera. I have to figure out how I'm going to do it, where I show a comic and I show a coin that I found while metal detecting that's kind of related in my world of, oh my God, I can't believe I found this. And here's the equivalent in a comic world, like this is a Hulk 181, I mean, this is this and so forth. And that's it right now.
Cool. And Adrian, what's coming up for you, sir?
So I am going to return this Sunday with the greatest tailgate hangout before Mark's Legion of Comics is at week's end. We're going to do it up dirty up there. I don't know why I said that. I'm just going to be opening up packages and hanging out with anybody that comes on. You guys know how I do the hangout. I throw the link out in the chat, and whoever wants to come and hang out, whatever they want to say, whatever they want to do, as long as they're respectful to each other and respectful to other people, everybody's cool to hang out, because I wouldn't have met a lot of people had I not just hung out just in the chat, backstage, all those kind of things. Like, and I want to give that to the other people, because one of my favorite things after a live show, like right after this, like what you guys don't see is that we all just stay backstage and start talking real shit. So this stuff may even go on another hour 45. It just happens that way. But that's what I like to do on my hangout, is I like to give people that backstage feel that you are included. So I'm going to be doing that, and look out, I'm going to be dropping a video for my 700 sub push, and that should be coming out here pretty soon.
Nice. And Mars, what's coming up for you?
Well, I guess I have to write some comics, because I'm going to be bullied to write some comics.
Yeah,
just
some comics, right? Just like tweak them up a little bit, get them ready to pitch. But in all seriousness, I am hoping to film new content for my personal channel soon. It's been a while. I'm really slacking on that, but listen, editing, actually filming, making sure everything's perfect, again, perfectionist, takes a lot of time. That being said, I will be here this Sunday with Jen over on Casually Comics for our weekly comic show. It's a bit of a slow week this week, so we're trying to find some shenanigans to get into to help make up for the time.
Ooh, shenanigans.
All
right, awesome. All right, everyone in the chat, thank you once again. Always have an awesome time. And until next time, keep it casual. Attention all, use channel sponsor Rogue Trader at theroguetraderutah.com and my code Keep It Casual for 10% off your comic cleaning and pressing needs. Remember, when submitting your books to be graded, use a trusted professional.